to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank the Deputy Special Coordinator and the Humanitarian Coordinator for the Middle East, Mohanad Hadi, for his thorough briefing on the situation in the region. The Middle East today is the best illustration of the danger that is borne by drawn-out, unresolved regional conflicts. The failure to resolve the Palestinian question for more than 70 years has caused a number of brutal wars and brought unimaginable suffering to the peoples of the region. The other day, we marked 400 days since the Arab-Israeli confrontation moved into the hot phase, and over those 400 days, the UN Security Council has not been able to fulfill its mandate for the maintenance of international peace and security, nor has it been able to play the role that is entrusted to it by the UN Charter. Throughout this time, having got carte blanche from Washington to take absolutely any actions, Israel, arrogantly ignoring the position of the international community, is knowingly worsening the situation. Since the beginning of the escalation of the Palestinian-Israeli confrontation in October 2023, in the Gaza Strip, more than 44,000 people have died. 104,000 Palestinians have been wounded. Another glaring violation of all of the norms of international law was the Israeli bombing on the eve of our meeting of the area around Kamal Adwan Hospital in the north of Gaza, as a result of which 12 medical staff, including a senior doctor, were injured. The Israeli Defense Force, since the beginning of the conflict, has been committing gross violations of IHL and is attacking civilian objects, residential buildings, schools and hospitals. And these are not accidental mistaken strikes. This is a targeted tactic. According to the assessment of UNRWA Director General Filippo Lazzarini, 80% of Gaza's territory is a high-risk area where the civilian population has been caught in a trap and is essentially live targets for Israeli soldiers. And yet, for 40 days now, the residents of Gaza have not been able to get humanitarian assistance, the deliveries of which is being held up by all means by the Israeli authorities. We know from humanitarians that in the past week alone, the Israeli authorities have obstructed 2/3 of humanitarian operations. All of this is taking place against a backdrop of the campaign of repression that West Jerusalem has unleashed against UNRWA due to strikes on the agency's objects. Since the beginning of the escalation, more than 230 staff members have been killed, and in total the victims of Israeli attacks are 380 humanitarian workers. This is a monstrous record, the worst in modern history. By ignoring the opinion of the overwhelming majority of UN members and violating the norms of international law and the conditions of its own admission into the World Organization, Israel has adopted bills against UNRWA that prohibit the agency's activities and withdraw the UN entity's immunities and privileges. If these decisions enter into force, the last support left in Gazans' lives will collapse because in the foreseeable future, no one will be able to replace UNRWA. We once again demand that Israel observe its international legal obligations, that it not implement or that it repeal these bills. Madam President, over 5 months, the Council has not been able to take any decision on Gaza since the USA forced through Security Council Resolution 2735 in support of the so-called Biden Plan, which was based on the false assertion that Israel had consented to a deal. In fact, West Jerusalem didn't consent to any schemes, and the entire time continued to carry out its military plans and tried to impose its demands in violation of Resolution 2735. And in response, the USA only demands and continues to demand that we all put pressure on Hamas. Against this backdrop, it is telling that there are regular calls for the deportation of Palestinians from Gaza coming from the Ministers of National Security and Finances of Israel. All of this speaks to the true intentions of the Israeli authorities, who don't have a negotiated solution on their agenda. Their plan is clear: to create yet another irreversible fact on the ground, a scorched, depopulated Gaza that has been emptied of Palestinians. Last week, the Council, which for more than 13 months has not been able to demand an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire, got another opportunity to do so. The non-permanent members of the Council, led by Guyana, took the initiative to prepare a worthy draft resolution that contained both the demand for an immediate, permanent and unconditional ceasefire and also a demand for the immediate and unconditional release of hostages. But the USA again alone vetoed the draft, showing the entire world that they are not interested in the lives of Palestinian civilians nor the saving of the hostages. Because if they really were driven by a desire to get them released as quickly as possible, they would have done everything they could to stop the Israeli military operation in the Gaza Strip, in which the captured Israelis are also being killed. In particular, the other day, there were reports that one hostage had died and another had been seriously injured in a part of the north of the Gaza Strip that had been bombed by the Israelis. This is further confirmation that the further escalation is not going to help the hostages in any way. It is clear to all of us that their release will only be possible with an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. By vetoing the E10's draft, the USA found itself in total international isolation. Their approaches are not supported by the Middle East, nor the members of the Security Council, nor by the overwhelming majority of UN member states. Washington's stance on blocking the work of the Security Council on the Middle East remains a stain on the reputation of the outgoing US administration that it will never be able to wash off. Their indulging and playing into the hands of Israel has already led to the deaths of more than 44,000 Palestinian civilians, in large part women and children. How many more people need to die for Gaza to at last see peace? Or will the USA obstruct this until all the Palestinians have been exterminated and the question of the two-state solution falls away by itself? We would like to hope that other sensible members of the international community will have the determination to prevent that. Russia will continue to insist on the adoption of the most decisive measures to stop the bloodshed in Gaza. We stand ready to work on this matter with all rational and responsible members of the Security Council and also by working in the UN General Assembly. Madam President, the conflict in Gaza is spilling over into the region in the worst possible way, sowing chaos and destruction everywhere and threatening to drown the Middle East in blood. In Lebanon, Israel's military operation has killed more than 3,500 people. A further 15,000 people have been injured, and more than 1 million have been forced to leave their homes. As in Gaza, the majority of the casualties are civilians that have fallen under the destructive tread of Israel's war machine. The key to solving the conflict in Lebanon is the full implementation by all parties of Resolution 1701 of the UN Security Council, which stipulates observing and respecting Israel's obligations to stop all offensive military operations, to withdraw its military forces from the south of Lebanon and to end the occupation of Lebanese lands, and also the provisions on the withdrawal of all Hezbollah formations to the north of the Litani River. Russia's approaches to the Middle East settlement are well known. They are based on the universally recognized international legal basis and have remained consistent and principled over many decades. We have no doubt that only a ceasefire in Lebanon and in Gaza, as well as the stabilization of the situation in the West Bank, will create the preconditions for peace talks, which would be able to bring about the long-awaited, just and lasting peace in the Middle East. It can only be based on the two-state solution that stipulates the creation of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state within the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, coexisting in peace and security with Israel. The experience of the past decade shows that such negotiations need to be conducted under the aegis of all key international and regional players, rather than being monopolized by individual powers that are interested exclusively in advancing their own agenda. Only then will it be possible to restore historical justice for the Palestinian